So what did we say yesterday? Is that we started dealing with the question, why are sacrifices special? In the sense that they give the composure, the nachat ruach, to Hashem's spirit, as it were. And so we explained what we usually explain in Chassidus, that all of reality is the fulfillment of God's will. That's a definition per se. That what we call reality, this reality that we live in, is actually a fulfillment of God's will. It was God's will that came out, and when it came out, it became the attribute of kingdom, of sovereignty, and the sovereign, his purpose is to have his will done. And the creation wants to perform that will. That's its fulfillment also. And so we talked a lot about the need that a human being has to feel that he's part of something that creates a framework for life. That without that, the human being always feels lost, unfulfilled. And some people say that, so we didn't get into that, I don't want to get into it now. Okay, so let's continue.
But it hasn't really answered the question, because, you woke up 10 minutes late today. That was also a shame as well. And you asked me if I may have waited 5 or 10 minutes. I could have got burgers. I could have done, in theory. I said, okay, so no one comes to learn with you.
Yeah.
But I didn't. That's also a shame as well. So everything you do is a shame as well. Every move that you make.
How are you fulfilling Hashem's will?
Not losing my temper, not getting annoyed.
Instead of there, you have choice. But the fact that somebody wakes up late, let's say there's a good reason for it. I don't know.
Right. Shem wanted to have the extra 10 minutes.
Okay. But I didn't fulfill the will. It wasn't a state of somebody with choice. It's not nature. Nature fulfilling.
Out of bed, so never mind, but without. I'm just saying. In the end,
it's true. We say that nature is constantly fulfilling Hashem's will. It's fine. But the chiddush is that something, and that was the point yesterday, that something that has an existence, a separate existence, and is willing to cancel out that separation, is willing to nullify that separation in order to fulfill the will. Meaning all the mitzvot are really, in a sense, they're different than nature. Nature also has mitzvot, but it's called chukim. It's like the laws of nature. We saw this on Shabbos, that the Alter Rebbe once said, somebody brought as an example of how incredibly powerful his words were, because maybe it's not such a surprising idea, but he once said that all the angels and all of nature would give anything to be able to say one bracha. Okay? That a human being can do something that nature can't do at all. And really, in essence, what it means is that nature can only do what it was programmed to do.
But nature doesn't even know about making brachas.
No, so the angels know. The angels that run nature, they know about it.
The angels.
Okay, so they say
they're
that
jealous of us.
They're very jealous. They would give anything to be able to say a bracha just once. They would turn the world upside down to be able to do it, but they can't, because they're locked into where they are. The fact that we have choice, that we have freedom of will, is unheard of. It's such a novelty. And that's where the korbanos come in, because they, more than any other mitzvah, they symbolize the turning back the clock, as it were, or reversing the process of creation, where something that is already formed, something that already exists and has a separate existence, decides to nullify, to obliterate, to annihilate that separate existence. It says that's a novelty.
Okay, so then you wonder why there's no korbanos today. It's so important. Why is there no korbanos?
So that's what he wants to say, that's what we do when we daven. He says that why we don't have is because, as the Rebbeim said, and I think it's been proven again and again, unfortunately, to be true. Lo mirtzonenu galenu me'artzenu. That it's not up to people. Again, people will keep waving the flag of there's 6 million Jews here. But there's another 8 million that aren't here. Meaning, the Torah didn't become complete by bringing 6 million people here. It became very nicely, again, more full life for 6 million people if they want it. But nothing changed. There's no mitzvah that changed. Okay? If by some amazing process or a miracle, whatever it is, suddenly 2 more million Jews would come to Eretz Yisrael, and we'd have the majority of the Jews in the world here, and you probably need 2 million or 3 million more to have a clear majority. Then things would change. Then there would suddenly be mitzvot that you have to do. But still it wouldn't be complete. Why would it not be complete? Still the Galus wouldn't be over. Why? Because the heart of everything is still not there. So more than half of the mitzvahs you still can't do without the Beis Hamikdash. So in that sense, we don't have anything better than prayer. That's all we have. But the idea is that prayer is the same process. It's the process by which the separate entity is able to nullify itself, to return to become one with the Creator. One would say that all the mitzvahs are like that, because in all the mitzvahs that's what you're doing. That's true. But in most of the mitzvahs you're doing something constructive. And bringing a sacrifice, what a waste, right? At the end of Sukkah, right? What's her name? Miriam, from the house of one of the houses of the Kohanim, who married a Roman, and because of that, the whole house was not obliterated. They were all consuetam. They all received the fine, as it were. Again, they weren't allowed to take part in this or that. I don't remember what they took away from them. Why? Because she came to the temple and she said, "Lupus, lupus," meaning wolf, wolf. When will you be satiated from wasting the wealth of the Jewish people? Because that's what it is. It's like burning something. Nuts. What kind of a mitzvah is this? What's constructive about that? It's a very hard mitzvah to understand. That's the way people don't get it today. Where's the closest thing that we have to it? Maybe today, I don't know. When somebody takes his money and he builds a shul, but he didn't burn it. You didn't take the money and burnt it. You got something for something. You changed form. You took the money, you changed it into something else. All the mitzvahs that we do, it's that way, that we take what we have and we turn it into something more holy. That's fine. But here you're taking something perfectly good, animal's perfectly good, you could eat it. If it's kosher to go on the altar, it's kosher to be eaten. And you burn it? Why? Why in the world would you do this? Why would Hashem even command this? So it's true that you don't have to do this in a sense of burning it. You don't have to. You can make it shlamim most of the time. Like if it's a personal korban, you can usually make most of the chatat or shlamim eat of that. Kohanim eat from it, you eat from it. So. But the olah, these two sacrifices, the communal sacrifices that were brought every day, one sheep in the morning, one sheep at night. What good is that? So he says, you're right, but it's a symbolic gesture. We don't take all the sheep in the world and burn them. We take 2 a day. And we say that this is a symbolic gesture for the entire congregation and for all the Jewish people, for all the world, that we understand that at the core of our being is something that separates us from you, and we need to obliterate that. We want to do that. We also want to live separately. It's not that we don't want to live separately. We do. We want the separate state also. But we also understand the meaning. We understand that we need to do an extra something in order to connect to you. And that extra something, that's what they symbolize. So in place of bringing, of this obliteration that occurred in a physical sense, people saw it. So now we do it personally, each one of us, every day, 3 times a day.
Perhaps, I hesitate to say this, but perhaps one could say that the davening is also burning. You have an hour in the morning when you go out and do your best work, and you burn it. You don't do anything with it. You have nothing physical to demonstrate for
Right?
that
You got nothing out of it.
hour issue, except for the 5 minutes you were saying Shmoneh when you've got peace and quiet to work out. You know, what's in the stock market. But the actual hour in shul per se has nothing to show for it.
Right.
You had an hour and you gave it to Hashem. It's that hour given to Hashem. That quarter of an hour means I've given it to Hashem. That half an hour, I've given it to Hashem. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
You can't reuse that time. You can't put it in the bank and take it out later. So perhaps that's the closest you've got to a korban.
Right. For a lot of people, that's the main benefit. I mean, I certainly don't obliterate anything when I daven. The only thing I'm obliterating is time.
You know, your own personal private time.
Right.
You could be writing. You could be doing this. You could be doing that. Okay.
And you even make the cheshbon with Hashem. Hashem, what would you prefer me to do? Write another page of Torah, or waste my time saying words that I said yesterday anyway,
And don't necessarily
mean,
understand,
or even understand sometimes. So the logical side, which is the separatist side, okay, that wants to remain separate, so it says it's an utter waste of time, this davening thing, especially if you have to go to shul. Okay. And you waste time waiting for people. You're right. It's time wasted. And that time, and why do you do it in the beginning of the day? Right? There's the whole sikha from the Rebbe, a very important sikha, that we take the choice and we offer it as a sacrifice. The best time of the day. There's no better time. The morning. We do in the morning in an hour, you can't do it during the day in 3 hours. So, yeah. Yeah, it's very, very strong. Okay. V'nei lemata, so the second paragraph on page 13. Bitul hayesh lainu bitul gashmiut leruchaniut. So here below, when you say bittul, when you say nullification, and turning the clock back, going from yesh back to ayin, from that which is perceptible to that which is imperceptible. So that means taking something physical. Here below it means taking something physical and turning it into something spiritual. So like we said, if you take money that you had, you could have used it for physical needs, and now you use it to build a shul, or you do something else spiritual with it. So that's called transforming something from physical into spiritual. Ach באמת למעלה, but above, גם בחינת הרוחניות ובחינת יש. שאין לך עצם מלמטה שאין לו מזל, והמזל מקבל משומרי האופנים, האופנים מקבלים מחיות הקודש שבמרכבה, והחיות משרפים, שהמזל מבחינת יש לגבי האופנים, והאופנים לגבי חיות הקודש. So he says, people have this tendency, right, to think that spiritual is godly. There's no. Above, spirituality is just like physicality. There's no difference between them. They're both creations. Whether it's spiritual, physical, it's all the same. It doesn't really matter. Spiritual, what is spiritual? Angels. All these angels, they're physical beings. In the end, sorry, not physical. They're created beings.
They do have some physicality, no?
They can have. When they come down, they can have. But they're not. Normally, they're just spiritual. So it would be like somebody.
Letters are physical.
So it would be like a physicist saying, "I'm completely theoretical. I don't do anything in the world. I only deal with equations. Equations are not physical things; they're abstract. So, see, I'm living in the spiritual world. I'm very close to God. Yeah, relative to the physical, you're right. The guys that have to build the particle accelerator, they're just grease monkeys in the end. You're very spiritual. Okay, but spiritual for Hashem is the same as physical. There's no difference. They're both created. And so it's not enough to transform something from the physical to the spiritual. That's not enough of a reversal of the direction from ayin to yesh. And you didn't really reverse it from yesh to ayin. It's not ayin yet. It's relatively still yesh. It's relatively still being. It's still something that exists. ועזה אמרו כל בעלי השיר יוצאים בשיר שהשירה וזרם בבחינת שמחה ותענוג שהוא בחינת יציאתם מן הרתקן ובחינת כלים שלהם המגבילים אותם. So really, the same process that happens from the physical to the spiritual, there's also in the spiritual itself. How does that work? As it says, in the spiritual, you go from level to level with music. Music is to the spiritual as what to the physical? What does the same thing? What music does to the spiritual world, something else does to the physical world. In the physical world, we said you go from one physical level to the next until you even become spiritual. So we call that refinement. What causes refinement? What would you say causes refinement? What's the
Many things.
what?
Could be done.
Yeah, but you want one thing. Just like music does it spiritually. Music takes you from one spiritual level to the next. What takes you from one physical level to the next?
You could say that, you could see this, you could
So
say
the mind. You say the mind, intellect. Intellect takes you, all the development we've seen in the world, you say thought. Thought is what takes us from one physical level to the next. We become more and more refined because we use our brain. And that's called avodat berurim. That's called the work of refinement. But music is something entirely different. It's for the spiritual. It does the same thing, but in the spiritual realm. So you go from one spiritual level to the next. That's why you have the Arba Bavot, okay? The Alter Rebbe's Nigun. And you have, and it's built on the four worlds. Now, if you don't understand what the worlds are, it's hard to understand why this melody specifically is taking you from one world to the next. But it's definitely not taking you from one physical world to the next. Right? It's not doing that. Because it's not, the music doesn't affect the physicality. But what is this saying? Yeah, how much music was there 100 years ago? How much music is there now? It says something tremendous about the world. That the souls today are not so worried about refining the world anymore.
Goyish music, there was a lot 100 years ago.
How much?
All the
To
classical
have
music.
music, you had to have somebody play an instrument.
You had all the classical music.
So you had that. How many times could you go and hear a rendition of Mozart by a symphony orchestra? Today, all you do is you don't even have to have a disc anymore. Those CDs. You don't need CDs anymore. You just go to YouTube. You type in Mozart, I don't know, isn't this symphony, and you listen to it. There's no comparison, right? So what happened to the world? The world is more and more dealing with spiritual refinement. Unfortunately, just as music can take you up, just as the mind can refine, it can also make you more coarse. How? If you begin to think about things that are more and more banal and more, let's say, disgusting, and things that are more sexual, they take you further and further down into the world. So rap music, for instance, doesn't lift the spirit. Doesn't take it anywhere. In fact, it makes it more coarse. It tells the spirit, you know what kind of body you want to inhabit? You want to inhabit a disgusting body that's dealing with drugs and tattoos and this and that's what you want. So that's the type of music that it is. You can hear from the beat where it's coming from. It's pushing you down to the feet. We talked about this once, and percussion is the feet. And string instruments, they're the heart. So the moment that you bring the heart, there's emotions. So it takes you from world to world in the emotions. So not all music takes you up. It can also take you down. The same way that there's mind that can take you up and it can take you down. Less and less refined. So music does that in the spiritual world. But just the fact that music is the vehicle, is the instrument through which you can move in levels, between levels of the spiritual worlds, that also tells you that they have a reality. They have a vessel and a light, just like we do in the physical world. There's no difference, because you remove the vessel. Yotzim min artikan, they come out of their holster, and they a light to a higher level. That's what music does for the spiritual world. So that's still not a complete reversal of yesh me'ayin. You haven't yet gotten to the stage of ayin miyesh. You haven't yet come to something imperceptible from something that was perceptible before. Or in our language, you would say something that's no longer separated from God, from something that was separated from God earlier. And you haven't come to that yet. So he says, "V'nei ikar habitul yesh la'ayin b'maseh hakorbanot." That you can only reach through the sacrifices. That's what the sacrifices do. שנפש הבהמות היא מבחינת פני שור מהשמאל, והידי הקורבן עולה ונכללת בשורשה מבחינת פני שור שבמרכבה. So the nefesh that was originally down here in the body is now goes back to its root. It goes back to its source. ולכן היה השיר על הקורבן. And so they also had the idea of music while bringing the sacrifice, because there's also spiritual ascent. It's also true. There's also ascent in the spiritual realm. But the main thing is, ומשם הוא עולה למעלה מעלה עד רום המעלות על ידי אריה דאכיל קורבנים. You have to have the lion that eats the sacrifice in the end. You have to have the fire was like a lion that eats the sacrifice. Meaning, what it's doing is it's obliterating the separate existence. And it's a symbol for you. Okay, you go in the morning to watch this happen in order to feel it on yourself. Or like you said, even just to waste the time itself. Burning the time. And burning the time itself is already the feeling that I've taken the best portion of my separate self and I've annihilated it in order to bring it back to God. וגבוה מעל גבוה, I'm skipping a little bit to the next column, בחינת חסד עליון, בחינת וימינות חבקני, להתקלל באור אינסוף ברוך הוא ממש. And this obliteration, this brings you back to the infinite light itself. There's nothing separate anymore.
So people davened in the time of the Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah. Not. It says in First Temple, they only davened when they wanted to, meaning they felt the need to. In the Second Temple, they already had communal davening in set times. There was already something like that. How advanced it was not. It wasn't probably like ours, but it existed. There's many Batei Knesiot from Second Temple period. So we don't know if they're from the Second Temple period, meaning from, we know they're exactly from the year 10 CE, and before the temple was destroyed, the year minus 50 CE, before the temple was destroyed. They're from 150 CE, 70 years after the temple was destroyed. It's hard to say exactly when. But in the Second Temple, we began to have communal davening. And communal davening is what we're talking about. That's what comes in place of the sacrifices. And this is what davening is about. The sages use this incredible image. They say the angel, the archangel, Michael, he is constantly taking the souls of the Jewish people when they daven, and he's sacrificing them, he's offering them as burnt offerings on the altar above. What is that? What kind of image is that? He's not a soul snatcher. He doesn't come and take your soul. Rather, you place he's like the Kohen. He's Michael, he's Chesed. He's like loving kindness, like the Kohen himself. So he's the Kohen above. He's the Kohen Gadol above, in the spiritual realm. And in the spiritual realm, the person takes the soul and he puts it. He gives it to the Kohen. He says, "Here, take this and give it. I offer this as a sacrifice." What do you mean I offer this as a sacrifice? I'm willing to forego my separateness. I'm willing to say I'm not separate from God. That's what we mean when we say in Birkat Toda'ah, right? What do we say there? V'ishei Yisrael u'tfilatam tekabel beratzon. Ishei Yisrael, what is Ishei Yisrael? So Ishei Yisrael has two meanings. I think we talked about this in the past.
I don't remember.
Ishei Yisrael supposedly means the burnt offerings of the Jewish people. Ishei is like Ishei Reach Nichoach LaHashem. It's like a burnt offering. But right away, it's very hard to understand Hebrew and not understand that this means something else. Ve'ishei Yisrael also means the people of Israel. It's like saying Anshe Yisrael. But Ishe Yisrael, same idea. They're related also, these two words, Ish and Ish. Okay? We know that they're related. That in its at its core, human existence is like a fire. And how was this explained? In the ancient world, they used to say, just as fire needs air in order to burn, the human being needs to breathe in order to live. Needs to breathe air. Why do you need to breathe air? Because you're a fire. So they had many examples where this fire was in the body. So usually they'd say the fire was the consuming aspect of food, right? There's energy that needs to be expended. So what does a person have inside? He has a fire inside. And that's how they imagined it. You're cooking. No, not just the liver. The whole digestive system was considered to be like a fire, like cooking something. So their image was there was a great book from Johns Hopkins, because I went to Johns Hopkins, so they send me their publications, a list of their publications every couple of weeks. A few years ago, there was an incredible study that somebody did, and I didn't have any money then. I didn't buy it. I really wanted to buy it, and now I could probably find it. I can probably find it on the internet. And I haven't had time to read it, so that's why I haven't looked it up. But now I remember that I made a mental note that I need to read this book. Somebody did a real study of the language and metaphors used for digestion up to the 17th century. Like, really went back from the Greeks and on, and I guess he also did Oriental thought, to see how people approached understanding what digestion does. But it's clear that the overwhelming metaphor was of a fire burning inside the person, and that's how the body digests. So we, in a sense, would say there is a chemical fire going on. I don't know if you would call it fire. I don't know. You know.
Yeah, I think you could.
I don't know if a chemical fire is exactly what I'm saying, but the acid burning the food down.
The breakdown.
So burning and breaking is pretty much the same idea. So we wouldn't call it a fire anymore because we don't have that concept. But overall, it could be that that's what it is. It's a chemical fire. And when the fire is not working well, then you get all the different problems in the body. So this idea of Ishei Yisrael Tfilatam, what he's saying is that the Jewish people, when they pray, it's like offering their souls to be burnt on the altar. ולמטה בהתלבשות בגוף וכבשים, ובחינת העבר הבאה, באה מלמעלה בתפילתם, לעלותם מקשר נפשם של ישראל ולוקחים חיים דווקא באור אינסוף ברוך הוא ממש. But really, it's not the work that you do. It's when Hashem, right, the fire came down from above. What is this in the experience of a human? It says in the experience of a human, this is what we call great love, major love. And we've talked a lot about major love. That's why great love is always related to Aaron. Right? Aaron is always the symbol of the great love. Like Michal, same thing. That he's the one who facilitates the great love coming down. And great love means that it's not your work that is burning the separateness. It's actually something that's coming from above. That's what you get. That's the reward that you get for showing up in shul. It's almost a praise by itself. Okay? If somebody says it doesn't pray by itself, I don't know. For me, it does pray by itself.
What do you mean praise by itself?
I don't even know where I am in davening usually. It prays by itself.
I have a lot of problems with the siddur open and davening.
And you don't know where you are.
Then I have to go and search for a place
where am I? So I don't know if it doesn't pray by itself. You know, the song that it doesn't pray itself. It doesn't learn itself. But prayer is very close to being by itself. I think that prayer, out of all the things that we do, is the thing that's closest to being habitual. But habitual here means that you don't have to expend energy, it just comes from above. It's burning you from above. וזהו לחמי לישי, פירוש לישי לאש שלי, ששרפים ובוערים אליי, דהיינו השרפים שהם מבחינת יקוד. Sorry. It's a pasuk that I always, I guess, quote wrong, from Yeshaya, in chapter 10. אש בוערה בליבם תמיד, בתשוקה גדולה ונפלאה ובאהבה עזה כרשפי אש, להיבטל לכלל באור אינסוף ברוך הוא, מחמת השגתם הגדולה שהם בעולם הבריאה, שהוא למעלה מעולם היצירה והעשייה. It says the same thing that happens by the angels, that they want to ascend to a higher level, happens by davening by us as the fire burns us from above, and it makes you want to be included within the infinite. Not to be separate. We have to end, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Really? Why?
He was burning with fire when he was done.
But the point here is that everybody does.
So he did it in an extraordinary way.
That's why we always you always hear that this talk about his face looked like fire when he was davening. That's exactly it. Right? People said that once somebody lifted the Baal Shem Tov's talis.
Yeah, he had a problem afterwards.
And he said he looked like he was dead, and he couldn't.
I don't know where anybody could have the
gall.
Or didn't want to use that word, and anybody could do such a thing.